So our next speaker, next up in the program, is the founder of Crypto Self-Direct and wealth advisor with Innovative Advisory Group. He's a trailblazer in the field of crypto wealth management strategies and works with Bitcoin and crypto early adopters to provide advanced financial planning with a particular focus, and this is something that people think about all the time, IRAs and 401ks. So he's the real expert on it. Please welcome Timothy Picciott.
It is great to be back here. For those who don't know, I'm Tim Picciott. I'm a certified financial planner, chartered retirement planning counselor, run a virtual financial planning practice out of Phoenix, Arizona, and also an anarchist. So you see there, I sort of had to sneak in the financial planning part in there, because in this room, that's usually the bad word. However, because you guys don't know me, I probably cost people in this room, and certainly the room last year, probably tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars from the strategies that I was helping to develop. Now, my presentation today is called Crisis Retiring, and it's really a perfect tee-up from all the other speakers we had the past 2 days, because just because it says crisis does not mean that we need to go have our head down in the sand and think it's all doom and gloom, because if you look at what the word crisis comes from, it's actually the Chinese symbols for danger and opportunity. And luckily, there's actually a girl who speaks Mandarin in the crowd, and so I wasn't actually sure if this actually meant that, because I don't speak Mandarin, and I pulled out the slide yesterday, she did confirm it. So luckily, it doesn't mean like I love government or something, or soup. So it does mean crisis. But with that, anytime there's a crisis, and we had lots of other speakers, touching this today, the name of the presentation is actually an ode to Mr. Doug Casey, who wrote the book Crisis Investing, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Because as these turbulent times come, there's going to be a lot of ways for a lot of people to make a lot of money and to also hold on to their purchasing power. Now, a lot of you are familiar with the quotes from both Rockefeller and Rothschild, that they both say something along the lines of, the best way to make money is when there's blood in the streets. So the strategy that I was recommending for the people that opted in last year was something I called the protective growth portfolio. What I did is I took a tiny bit of their portfolios, invested it into put options, because what you ultimately don't know is no one can predict the future. No one knows, is the market going to crash? Or if the market crashes, is the Fed going to print $10 trillion because of some new stupid, Green New Deal that the people are going to conjure up, and all of a sudden the market's going to be at, $1 trillion, on the Dow? Nobody knows, but my strategy basically says, I don't really care with this, and this is not a strategy you want to run forever, but I got into it, pretty much at the perfect time, and I made the video ahead of time, so, anyone can Monday morning quarterback afterwards. But anyways, we got details on that. Then, I also saw that there was a certain crypto IRA company that was out there that was charging 15% up front. And I'm like, that is absolute highway robbery. I can pretty much guarantee I can do it cheaper than that. So I started off to seek on that path of how someone could be able to do that. And unfortunately, right as this was all going on, the price of Bitcoin went from like $2,000 to $20,000. And the next thing I know, the broker-dealer I was with, LPL Financial, largest independent broker-dealer in America, they banned every single advisor in America from speaking out about crypto a month before I was going to talk here. And so I was like, all right, well, I can drop my Series 7 and become what's called a registered investment advisory, RIA-only advisor. I'm not going to bore you guys with all the details. Still would be a pretty big move. And then they knew what I was going to do. They knew the talk. I'd already discussed all this over. Well, anyways, they got their panties in a bunch the week before I was supposed to present here and forced me to resign just so I could give this talk last year. Now, when I resigned in the past, I'd only left one other company before, and I left at 8 in the morning, and by like 8:30, I was already live again. I figured, okay, what I'm doing is kind of out there. Maybe it'll take a week, maybe it'll take a month. Well, what I didn't realize is that when your entire business plan involves basically the entire financial system, they don't move you to the front of the line to get approved. So I didn't end up getting approved till about July, which by then all the horses were already out of the barn on my, hey, sell your crypto when it's high strategy. And so it was a pretty big cost. I then had to end up selling my house, which I bought at the exact low, so it was good to get out of there anyways, just to be able to basically survive and fund this business. And then come to August, started moving my existing clients over, and then in October we got our first crypto IRA all set up. So there was a silver lining there that the people were getting in at around $3,500 Bitcoin. So if there was a silver lining, that would be it. But I just want to let you know that there is a good financial advisor out there. To speak here last year, I gave up my Series 7 license, paid a 5-figure fine for being here, lost over $10 million of assets under management, of which about 7 I knew I was going to lose. The other 3 was a mixture of half of them said, hey, you're too pro-Trump. The other half said you're too critical on Trump. And so when you're a libertarian, that's the exact quandary you always get yourself into, but I'm not making apologies for anything that I say. So that translates to about $100,000 of residual income that I basically voluntarily had to give up to speak here last year. So I'm not just some guy up here shilling away and out here to get everybody's money. I'm out here to help the community because I know that there's basically nobody else like me in this community, and I know that there is a ton of information that can help everybody else in this room. Also last year, I did mention I had to... Thank you, I really do appreciate that. So I was, if it's any consolation for being unemployed for most of 2018.
I'm here to free you so you don't have to hide, so you and your family can live the life and have the lifestyle that you deserve without being a target of the crown. Many of you might be thinking, screw them. They don't know what I have, and that's exactly why I have it to begin with. Well, someone might know what you have. Your ex-spouse might know what you have. Your ex-business partner might know what you have. Or worse yet, no one knows what you have, and you end up getting hit by a bus tomorrow. Or have an earthquake in Mexico, I don't know. But now, your kids and your significant other might have to suffer because you didn't take the time to come up with a backup plan. How would that make you feel? And what would your intuition, sacrifice, and good luck be worth then? Okay, so maybe you have a method of transferring your crypto to the next generation or to your heirs. But is your teenage daughter going to crack to the IRS? Is your significant other going to crack to the IRS? Or is your nervous Nelly aunt going to declare all of your capital gains? It's something very important to consider. Another facet of what I have to talk about today is the person that's out there that has a significant amount of crypto and now has to live way below their means so that way they don't draw the ire of the man. And fear of not having money should now not be replaced by fear of having money. And I'm here to help eliminate that fear.
But ultimately, the person that did this type of planning was able to transfer on to their heirs and to their legacy $128 million, and the person that didn't do this type of planning was able to pass on $104 million. So right there, there's 24 million reasons why you might want to talk to me if you happen to be that person. And again, I did use a 9% growth rate, so it wasn't like an insane number that I was using. But if you used a slightly higher number, which is also not insane in a dollar collapse scenario, if you use 20%, and again, this was someone taking a static $750,000 per year. In the real world, you'd probably take a percentage. But anyways, what it looks like is the person that did the planning was able to transfer $4.6 billion. The person that didn't do the planning was able to transfer $3.7 billion. So there you had almost a billion reasons to come talk to me. But when you go through and you look at all the ancient families and the really wealthy families, there was a study done in Florence, Italy recently, and it turned out that the families of 1427 were the richest families back then were actually still the richest families today. And there's a reason why. It's because they're using these types of strategies, they know the loopholes, and they're able to basically put themselves and their families in much better positions because of that. Does anyone think, Mark Zuckerberg just gave away all of his money just because he's the best guy in the world? Or do you think this guy just gave away all his money because he loves everyone? He calls it his Open Society Foundation, so you can't get really more Orwell than that. Then you've got Bill Gates, and he gave away all of his money, and you've got Warren Buffett, who's always just a nice old man eating an ice cream, so he's very non-threatening, and that means you can trust him. And then, of course, you've probably seen this guy from Jim Cramer. Does anyone think Jim Cramer is super charitable, that he wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't some sort of benefit for him and his family? And hopefully for him and his family, he didn't have too much in GE, because they have not been doing very well lately. But it's funny, that's the picture that I found for him. And then you got the Mac Daddy of them all, John D. Rockefeller, who famously said, competition is a sin, who also gave away close to $500 million, non-inflation adjusted, way back in the day. Now, a lot of people probably heard there was a pretty famous guy in the crypto space who famously sold and or donated all of his Litecoin at the very top of the market. I was at another conference and happened to run into this individual. There's a whole bunch of people around me, so it wasn't confidential. I was telling him what I was doing, and he said, yeah, that's actually what I did. I put my money into a charitable trust. So technically, Charlie Lee may not have actually sold his Litecoin. He could have sold his Litecoin into his own charitable trust, which is now technically a different entity, which means he's technically telling the truth. But I don't know if he still does or doesn't have his Litecoin. That's not the point. The point is, he's a really smart guy. He was at Google, one of Coinbase's first employees. I think he was like the third or fourth employee. Creator of Litecoin. And so when he sold out at the top, he got a massive tax break. This guy's tax break is probably worth probably 20 times more than.
This guy is one you want to get to know. Tim Picciott.
Okay, so I found a way for people who are already crypto rich to stay crypto rich. But how was I helping out the average person out there to invest into crypto? I found it hypocritical that I was recommending stocks when I myself hadn't bought a stock in over a year, but I was buying crypto. As many of you know, the average American is living paycheck to paycheck, and most people in America have the majority of their liquid net worth in their retirement accounts, which meant their options for investing into crypto were very limited. I also know of and have heard of many stories of people who had cashed out their 401ks and IRAs to purchase crypto, which then got me thinking, not only about the estate planning aspect of cryptocurrencies, but also the retirement aspect of cryptocurrencies. When I went to see what the options were, I was flabbergasted. Really, one of the only options out there was to either pay 15% up front or to have to invest into a Wall Street product, and that's not why I got into crypto. One of the strategies that I'm advocating for people is that they can use some of their retirement funds to roll over into a self-directed IRA, and then use a timely planned Roth conversion to convert from an IRA to a Roth IRA. And what do I mean by that? So let's say you invested $100,000 into crypto, you moved it from a 401k or IRA to a self-directed IRA. We all know that every, let's say, 3-4 months, the price of crypto goes down quite dramatically. So let's say now your $100,000 goes down to $30,000. At that point, you could convert at $30,000. So you're paying taxes on $30,000. You avoid the 10% penalty that you would have had to pay if you simply cashed out your 401k. And now, all of your gains from there on out are completely tax-free, legally.
What are we going to talk about today? We are mainly going to focus on the big retirement risks that are out there. And so we're going to start with some of the obvious ones out there. You've got market risk, that's the market going down, think 2008, nothing crazy there. You've got inflation risk. We're at the TDV Investment Summit. I don't think I have to spend too much time talking about potential for inflation risk. We have deflation risk, which, we got the quote from Thomas Jefferson, first by inflation, then by deflation, we'll end up homeless on the continent, or forefathers conquered, or something like that. And then what we also have is withdrawal rate risk. Withdrawal rate risk is where you're taking out a higher percentage of money. Let's say you're only earning 5% and you're taking out 7%. Well, eventually you'll probably end up depleting that. Again, none of these are really groundbreaking concepts. I'm getting into the other ones that you guys don't know about very soon. Another one is interest rate risk. What this is, and I'm going to get in more detail for this later on, it's the concept of when interest rates go up, the underlying values of the bonds go down. And since the time I was alive, the interest rates have done nothing but basically go down, 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 down. However, when interest rates start going up, it has very adverse effects in your portfolio. And there's a lot of people right now who think, oh, I want to be safe, so I'll keep my money in bonds. Probably not in this crowd, but just like the general, slave crowd that's out there in America. But anyways, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. The big enchilada of what I'm going to talk about today is going to be on what's called sequence of return risk. And that is the concept that the order of your returns is actually more important than the average of your returns. So, if you bought Bitcoin at 20,000, you don't give a shit that it averaged 1,000% per year if you ended up losing 80, 90% year one. And so you have to figure out a way in retirement to be able to hedge yourself from sequence of return risk. It gets really loud when I walk over there, so I'll try to stop doing that. Now, we also see with Bitcoin, the numerous times people could have experienced sequence of return risk over the years. I think we all are well aware that Bitcoin is very volatile. And the biggest risk of them all is actually what's called longevity risk. It's living too long. Because believe it or not, the longer you live, actually George Soros is more of a longevity risk for us, because that's actually sort of like a joke, because the longer he's alive, the more bad shit he does to us. So he's probably, unfortunately, not going to run out of money. But what happens is, longevity risk is what's known as a risk multiplier. So the longer you're alive, the more chance you're going to have a market crash. The more chance you're going to have inflation risk or deflation risk or central banks messing things up. All the other risks, the longer you're, I mean, if you retire at 64 and you die at 65, you don't have to be, some sort of genius to figure out your retirement. But, in this crowd, we're probably not eating as many GMO foods. We're probably, I guess if you don't see me at the bar, I mean, I'm not usually doing that. But, this crowd is definitely a lot healthier, probably not taking all the vaccines, probably, up on more information to probably keep themselves and their family alive longer. So, longevity risk could be a very big factor for, the liberty, freedom, and, I hate using like an inclusive term, but the movement of people who are here generally are probably more healthy than the average person that's out there in America. So now we're going to go talk about interest rate risk. Once again, it works sort of like a seesaw. So, when the interest rates go up, the underlying values of the bonds go down. And what that means, basically, in skipping to the end here, is if you had $1 million in a 10-year bond and rates were only to go up 1%, the underlying value of your bond would then go down to $900,000. Now, you'd still get your 2-3% interest, $20,000, $30,000 a year. But the problem is, let's say you can't live off $20,000, $30,000 per year, and you need to live off 50, and now you're eating into principal. Now there's basically no way you're ever going to recover, and that's only if rates go up 1%. And so how this works is so if rates were to go up 2%, because of compounding, it'd be about $780,000. And so this is not far-fetched numbers. And there's so many people that you guys probably know, probably your friends and family, who are like, oh, well, I'm really safe, and I've got my money in a 10-year or 30-year bond. And I mean, the fact that you can, like a 1-year bond and a 10-year bond is paying about the same amount of interest, you would have to be an idiot to get a 10-year bond when you can get a 1-year bond if you're going to get a bond at all. So it's just very important that that it's not just us in this room that understand this. We got to make sure the people that we care about and people in our movement understand it, because it is important information. And here's a chart for the Federal Reserve Economic Database, otherwise known as FRED, where it shows where rates were one day, and I think it's close to 15-16%. I have my glasses on. So I mean, if you guys think this can't happen again, eventually the Federal Reserve could lose control of the interest rates, which, them losing control is not necessarily a bad thing for me if you guys are positioned correctly. But, I mean, last year I was interviewed by Ian Freeman outside of Free Talk Live during the main opening ceremony. And I told him that, the Federal Reserve basically has a choice where they can either choose to save the stock market, the bond market, or the dollar. They can't choose to save all three. So if they want to save the stock market by printing a whole bunch of money, well, then that can have adverse effects for the dollar, and vice versa. And again, that's not the main crux of my presentation today. So now I want to get into market risk. This is a concept that's also not crazy, not too ridiculous. A lot of people are pretty familiar with how math works. Where if your account goes down 50%, you've got to gain 100% to get back to even. What people aren't as familiar with is what it looks like when you're actively withdrawing money, when you're actively taking money out to live on. The math gets a lot more difficult. So if you were to lose 50% and you're taking 4% out per year, which is what most people do, you would have to gain 132% over the next 3 years to get back to even. And by then, you've probably already crapped your pants. You've already sold sold at the exact bottom, did all the wrong things, and you're basically, long story short, you're going to be screwed. Now, when you are accumulating funds, what I have here is two investors, investor A and investor B, and we've got they have the exact same returns, just the mirror inverse of one another. So investor A starts with 3 bad years, finishes with 7 good years. Investor B starts with 7 good years, finishes with 3 bad years. And because they are accumulating funds, what some people might refer to is if they were actively putting more money in, they would refer to that as dollar cost averaging. But if you just left a lump sum pile of money, it doesn't really matter because they weren't actively taking money out. Where the math starts getting more interesting is, okay, well, what happens in this scenario where these two guys earn the exact same percentage over 10 years, took out the exact same amount, started with the exact same amount, and what you see is investor A, after 10 years, had about $630,000, and investor B had a little bit over $1 million, and they earned the exact same thing. So you're never going to see anybody on CMBS, as I like to call it, talk about sequence of return risk. They're only talking about, this averages this averages that. Well, the average means nothing when you're about to retire. I mean, obviously, it's better having a higher average than a lower average. I mean, that's not rocket science there. But where this has actually worked in the real world, someone retired in April of 1970, and they started with $500,000. They were taking out 4.05%. They had 60% stocks, 40% bonds, rebalance annually, blah, 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 blah. The person that retired in April of 1970, after 30 years, had a little over $2.5 million. The person that retired 1 year before them had a little, about the same as what they started with, about $600,000. And the person that retired 4 months before that person ended up living with their kids because they ran out of money after 29 years, and that's all a 16-month window of when they chose to retire. And so you're never going to see anybody talk about this, and this is one of the most important things you can possibly know before you retire. And so if there's any nugget of information you guys got out of today, I hope this is one of the most important things that you can actually learn. But we also need to pay attention to how we can actually protect ourselves against this. Now what I want to discuss is common ways the Liberty community invests. So you got a lot of people who are, they fall into different camps. It might be an all gold or silver or all crypto or a combination of the three. And I'm very pro crypto, I'm very pro gold and silver. I mean, I've got, silver gold on the back, so I do like it. Little band of white there. But what happens is if you have all of your money in gold and silver or crypto, it can protect against inflation risk, protects against interest rate risk, but it doesn't do a great job protecting against sequence of return risk, withdrawal rate risk, deflation risk, or longevity risk. Another way what people do is maybe they put all their money into cash. And that does a great job of protecting against market risk, deflation risk, sequence of return risk, interest rate risk, but it does not protect you against inflation risk or withdrawal rate risk. And so one thing that I kind of coined this in 2008 was keeping all of your money is going broke safely. And what I've got there is I do have a podcast or a show that I'm running. One of them is the Liberty Advisor Show. It's basically all things that doesn't have to do with crypto. The other one is the Crypto Wealth Show. It's everything that has to do with crypto. And yeah, I've got a porcupine that has a joint in his ear with an AR-15 with a freedom stuff, because if you're offended by that, then I don't want to waste my time on you anyway. So it's sort of a qualifier. Even though every marketing person told me not to do that, and I apparently didn't listen. So maybe they should have told me to do it. I would have listened. So. But what I've got now is a slide where it shows different assets, so small cap stocks, treasury bonds, and over a 1 year time period, the volatility on short-term small cap stocks is huge. But over a 20-year time period, it's actually not that much. And so, a lot of this depends on how much time you have before you actually need to pull the money out, whether it's retirement, or you need it for a house, or you need it for your kids' college, or whatever you're saving money for. Something that's very important to keep in mind. But also, I can't sit up here and just give blanket recommendations. Everyone's going to have different goals, different risk tolerances, different lifestyles. You're going to be from different countries, live in different tax jurisdictions, have different preferences for crypto or precious metals. I do think you should have precious metals and cryptos in your portfolio. But the other one I want to talk about is the classic 60-40 portfolio. What that is 60% stocks, 40% bonds. It's probably the most common portfolio I see out there on a day-to-day basis. I mean, if you were to say, hey, you got your 55-year-old couple there, what portfolio do you have? My money would be on that every single time. And it does a pretty good job protecting against inflation risk, pretty good job against withdrawal rate risk. That's if you were to take 4% per year, it's a pretty good job against that. However, if you were to retire in, let's say, 2008, or before the next financial crisis that I think is coming, then it might not necessarily do a great job of protecting you. Now, I do have an entire podcast on this, and Tom Lee of Fundstrat, some of you guys might know who he is, did a little variation on the 60-40 portfolio. What he showed was if you were to take 2% that was in stocks, and I'm just using this for the 60-40, and not saying you should have two, but what it found out is that if you were to take 40% in bonds, which I don't think you should have bonds, but just using that for devil's advocate, 2% in Bitcoin, 58% in stock, what they found out is that you actually decrease the amount of risk in your portfolio by adding Bitcoin, which is actually crazy, while greatly increasing the return. Now, obviously, it's subject to sequence of return risk, but that actually worked all the way up into 5% Bitcoin, and then they had one where it was 5% Bitcoin, 5% a crypto-related basket of assets, and that was only slightly more risky. And then once you got above 10, then the math didn't work out as good. Now, I think in even a better way is if you're going to have money in bonds, one of the only ways to actually protect against longevity risk is actually, and this is a word where there's a lot of varying opinions on this, but in my opinion is math and how the math works out in this. And I just had probably the top expert in the country on my show, which I have not actually released that podcast. So if you guys text the number, you'll be the first ones to get it. It was with Tom Hegna, who wrote Paychecks and Playchecks. He's makes about $1 million a year speaking, very big time guy. Luckily we were 1 degree of separation away, so I was able to get him on the podcast a few days ago. I have not released it, but what you can see is if you were to have the 40% into, let's say, an annuity instead, what you're then doing is you can then pull out about $47,000 per year, because the annuity is going to pay a lot more than the actual bond. Problem is, just like most cryptos, a lot of annuities are crap. A lot of them are sold by sleazy salesmen that might as well be BitConnect salesmen. And so you really need to know what kind you're doing, and what kind you need to do is going to be dependent on a whole bunch of other factors. Anyways, I've got a whole other presentation on that. It also shows that, and we had speakers talk about people that they knew that were really rich and had, that they weren't happy. What they found out is that people who had guaranteed income actually were happier than the people that had a lump sum of money. Now, I think you should have both, a lump sum of money and guaranteed income. And so as a recap today, there are better strategies for use for income and safety than bonds. Staying in cash is going broke safely. Many people have a lot more risk than what they actually think they have. Longer lifespans are going to make retiring more and more difficult. You want to be a contrarian, factor inflation into your projections. You want to know against the 7 risks that are out there. And then also, I really appreciate you guys having me back. Hopefully I don't lose my job this time or end up in a cage, and look forward to being back next year.
Wow, what an incredible 2 days. Unbelievable. Do you agree this is one of the best conferences you've ever been to? I mean, this has been, I think I've been here 3 years.
So I